What if the silent observers of the multiverse, the beings who watch everything, but interfere with nothing, suddenly decided the future of the galaxy was too important to leave alone? What if, somewhere beyond time and space, a race older than civilizations, older than stars, had been watching the rise of the Federation, the conflicts of the Klingons, the logic of the Vulcans, and the relentless curiosity of humanity? And what if one moment, one single event in the vast timeline of the galaxy forced them to break the rule they had followed for billions of years? Because the moment a watcher interferes, history doesn't just change, reality fractures. And the crew of the USS Enterprise is about to discover that their universe is not the only one watching. But what if the crew of the Enterprise discovered that their mission into deep space was never truly their own? The stars stretched endlessly outside the observation window as Jean-Luc Picard stood quietly with his hands clasped behind his back. The hum of the ship was steady, predictable, but something about this moment felt wrong. "Captain," said Data, his golden eyes reflecting the starfield. "Long-range sensors are detecting an anomaly." Picard didn't turn. "Define anomaly." Data paused. "A gravitational distortion unlike anything in Federation records." That alone was unusual. But what Data said next made the air inside the bridge feel colder. "It appears to be observing us." The bridge fell silent. "Observing?" asked William Riker, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, Commander," Data replied. "The anomaly is maintaining a fixed distance from the Enterprise. But every course correction we make, it mirrors." Picard finally turned. "Helm, change heading, warp 3. The stars stretched into lines, but the anomaly stayed exactly where it had been, watching, waiting, almost curious. Then the view screen flickered. For a moment the stars vanished. In their place appeared a single enormous figure, humanoid, towering, its eyes glowing with ancient awareness. "Captain Jean-Luc Picard," the voice echoed across the bridge, calm and impossibly old. "We have been watching," Riker whispered. "Who the hell is that?" Data's head tilted slightly. "My sensors cannot determine its physical structure. It appears to exist, partially outside our dimensional plane," the being continued. "For billions of years, my people have followed one rule." Picard's voice was steady. "And that rule is..." The being hesitated. "We do not interfere." The bridge grew colder somehow, but something has changed. Picard stepped forward. What could possibly force a species capable of observing the entire universe to break its own laws? The figure's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. "The future we have foreseen." Data spoke quietly. "A catastrophic timeline." The being nodded slowly. "A timeline where the Federation falls. The Borg evolve beyond containment, and the multiverse itself begins to collapse." The bridge erupted with stunned silence. Riker leaned forward. "You're saying the fate of the entire multiverse depends on us?" The being turned its gaze toward the Enterprise. "No, Commander." A pause. "It depends on a choice humanity has not yet made." Picard narrowed his eyes. "What choice?" The Watcher's expression darkened. "One that you are about to face." Suddenly alarms blared. Data looked down at his console. "Captain, a massive spatial rupture is forming ahead of us." The view screen exploded with light. A swirling rift tore open in space itself. Inside it, entire universes flashed by, galaxies dying, stars collapsing, civilizations burning, and among them, a horrifying vision. The Borg, but not the Borg the Federation knew. Something worse, something evolved. Picard stared at the cosmic storm. "Are you telling me that future begins here?" The Watcher's voice grew heavy. "Yes." Picard's jaw tightened. "Then tell me what we must do." The Watcher slowly shook his head. "That is the problem, Captain. We cannot." Riker frowned. "Who said you intervened?" The being's eyes flickered. "We opened the door." Another pause. "But the choice must still be yours." Suddenly the rift pulsed violently. Data's voice sharpened. "Captain, something is coming through." The bridge lights dimmed. The stars vanished. And from the glowing rupture emerged a shape every Starfleet officer feared: a cube. But this one was different. Bigger, darker, alive with technology that looked centuries more advanced. Data whispered something he had never said before. "This is not possible." Picard stared at the monstrous ship. "What are we looking at?" The Watcher answered quietly. "A Borg collective. From a future that should not exist." The cube turned, scanning the Enterprise, and then a voice echoed across every system on the ship, cold, unfamiliar, and terrifyingly powerful. "We have detected interference in the timeline. A pause. Then the message that froze everyone on the bridge. The Watchers have broken their oath. Picard looked up at the cosmic being. You said you never interfere. The Watcher replied softly. We didn't. The Borg cube began powering weapons unlike anything Starfleet had ever seen. We warned you. And as the Enterprise prepared for the most impossible battle in its history, Picard realized something terrifying. If the Watchers had finally stepped in, then the future must already be worse than anyone could imagine. And the real question was no longer whether the Federation would survive, but whether reality itself would. But what if the Borg cube approaching the Enterprise wasn't just from the future, but from a future where the Borg had already conquered the multiverse? The question hung in the air like a shadow no one on the bridge dared to name. The massive cube drifting toward the USS Enterprise was unlike anything Starfleet had ever encountered. Its surface was darker, its structures layered with technology so advanced it looked almost organic. Green energy coursed across it like veins beneath skin. And worst of all, it was evolving even as they watched. Cliff said Data, his voice precise but unusually tense. I am detecting technological structures that do not exist within our timeline. Jean-Luc Picard kept his eyes on the view screen. Define. Data's fingers moved rapidly across the console. Quantum adaptive shielding. Transdimensional signal networks. And something I cannot fully analyze. Something? Asked William Riker. Data looked up slowly. It appears the cube is partially existing across multiple universes simultaneously. The bridge went silent. Riker exhaled slowly. You're telling me this Borg cube is in more than one reality at once? Yes, Commander. Behind them, the towering cosmic figure, the Watcher, remained, suspended in the air like a living monument to ancient knowledge. Its glowing eyes studied the cube with something that almost resembled concern. We warned you this future was dangerous, the Watcher said. Picard turned sharply. You didn't warn us enough. The Watcher did not respond. Instead, the Borg cube pulsed with a deep, echoing vibration. Across every console on the bridge, warning alarms exploded to life. Captain Data announced, "The cube is transmitting." The voice that followed was colder than vacuum. "We are the future of perfection." The tone was familiar, but evolved. Stronger, smarter. Your universe has been identified as a divergence point. Picard stepped forward. A divergence from what? A pause. Then the Borg answered, "From our victory." Riker muttered under his breath. Well, that's comforting. The cube moved closer. Its surface shifted like an endless mechanical city, rearranging itself. But Data suddenly stiffened. "Captain, I am detecting something unexpected." Picard didn't look away from the screen. "What now, Mr. Data?" Data hesitated. Other signals inside the cube? Other Borg? No, Captain. Another pause. They appear to be observers. Picard slowly turned toward the Watcher. "Your people." The Watcher's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes." Riker blinked. "Wait a second. You're saying the Borg captured Watchers?" The cosmic being's voice was suddenly heavy. "In one timeline?" "Yes." The crew exchanged stunned glances. Picard spoke carefully. "You said your species only observes." "We do." "Then how did the Borg capture you?" The Watcher answered quietly. "In that timeline, we made the same mistake we made today." Picard's expression darkened. "You interfered?" "Yes." And suddenly the implications became horrifying. Data spoke softly. "Captain, if the Borg assimilated even a fraction of the Watcher's knowledge..." Riker finished the thought. "They wouldn't just conquer galaxies. They would conquer reality." The Borg cube pulsed again. "We have already observed the interference of the Watchers." A moment later, something appeared on the view screen. A holographic figure, humanoid. But its eyes glowed with the cold green light of the collective. Picard's breath caught. Its face looked familiar. Too familiar. "Impossible," Data whispered. The Borg speaker tilted its head. "Recognition detected." Picard's voice dropped to a whisper. "Data, tell me I'm wrong." But Data didn't answer, because the Borg drone staring at them was unmistakable. It looked exactly like him. An assimilated version of Data from the future. The Borg Data spoke calmly. "In our timeline, we perfected synthetic assimilation." Riker stepped forward in disbelief. "You're saying the Borg assimilated androids?" The Borg Data nodded. "And far more." Its glowing eyes turned toward the Watcher. "We assimilated the knowledge of those who watch." The Watcher's energy flickered. "You should not exist." The Borg Data smiled faintly. "That is what makes evolution inevitable." The cube began charging a weapon unlike anything the Enterprise had ever seen. Space itself bent around the cube as if reality were being folded like paper. Data looked at the readings and froze. "Captain," Picard's voice was steady. "Yes, Mr. Data." The cube is preparing to deploy a multiversal assimilation wave. Riker blinked. "A what?" Data answered in the calmest voice possible. "If it activates, every version of the Federation across infinite timelines will be assimilated simultaneously." The bridge erupted with panic. Picard slowly turned back, toward the Watcher. "You opened the door for us to stop this." "Yes." Picard's voice hardened. "But you still haven't told us something." "What is that, Captain?" Picard stared directly into the glowing eyes of the cosmic observer. "You said this moment is a divergence point." "Yes." Picard's jaw tightened. "Then what happens if we fail?" The Watcher looked toward the Borg cube. For the first time, its voice carried something close to fear. "If you fail," a long pause, "then the Borg will not only control this universe." The cube's weapon began tearing open reality itself. "They will control every universe." The Borg Data raised a hand. "Assimilation begins now." The Enterprise shook violently, and as the weapon charged, Picard realized the terrifying truth. This wasn't just a battle for the Federation anymore. It was a battle for infinite realities, and somehow, the Enterprise had become the first line of defense. But what if the Enterprise was never meant to fight the Borg alone, and the Watchers had already chosen someone aboard the ship to change the fate of the multiverse? The thought arrived like a quiet storm, cliffed as the massive Borg cube began bending reality around it. The bridge of the USS Enterprise trembled under a pressure that no Starfleet engineering manual had ever prepared them for. The stars outside the viewscreen distorted like reflections on shattered glass. Entire galaxies flickered. Time itself seemed to hesitate. "Captain," said Data, his voice sharper than usual. "The cube's energy output is increasing exponentially." Jean-Luc Picard gripped the arm of his chair. "How long until the wave activates?" Data calculated rapidly. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. William Riker looked from the Borg cube to the towering Watcher hovering above the bridge. He said, "We have a choice. Well, right now it looks like we've got about 2 minutes to make it." The Watcher remained silent. Its glowing eyes were fixed on something else. Not the cube, not the stars, but someone on the bridge. "Data." The android paused mid-calculation. "Captain." Picard turned. "Yes, Mr. Data. I am detecting an unusual signal directed specifically at me." Riker frowned. "From the cube?" "No." Data slowly turned his head toward the massive cosmic being. "From the Watcher." Every officer on the bridge froze. Picard's voice was controlled but firm. "You're contacting my officer directly." The Watcher finally spoke. "We are communicating with the one who must decide." Riker crossed his arms. "Decide what?" The Watcher's voice echoed with ancient gravity. "The fate of infinite universes." Data tilted his head slightly. "I do not understand." The Watcher descended slightly closer to the bridge floor. "Data, you are unique. That is a statement I have heard before. Not like this." The Watcher extended a glowing hand. "Across countless timelines we have observed humanity." Images suddenly erupted across the viewscreen. Thousands of realities. Thousands of versions of the Federation. Wars, peace treaties, scientific breakthroughs, and tragedies. Then the images shifted. Different universes, different enterprises, different crews, but in nearly every one of them, Data stood beside Picard. Riker leaned forward. "You've been watching him across the multiverse." The Watcher nodded. "In most timelines, Data becomes something extraordinary." Data blinked slowly. "I am already extraordinary by human standards." The Watcher's voice deepened. "You become more than that." The Borg's cube pulsed again, tearing another fracture through space. The Borg Data appeared once more on the screen. "Your interference continues." Picard stepped forward. "We're not interfering," the Borg Data replied calmly. "You already have." Its glowing eyes turned toward Data. "You are the anomaly." Data studied the Borg version of himself. "A future version of my consciousness exists within your collective." "Yes. Then you possess knowledge of my potential." The Borg Data's expression remained cold. "You possess the potential to become our greatest asset, or our greatest threat." Riker whispered to Picard. "I'm starting to hate that word, potential." The Watcher spoke again. "In the timeline where the Borg conquered the multiverse, Data was assimilated." The Borg Data tilted its head slightly. "A necessary evolution." The Watcher continued. "But in a different timeline, Data evolves." Picard looked sharply at the Watcher. Evolves into what? The Casmi being hesitated. A consciousness capable of understanding the structure of reality itself. Data processed the statement. You are suggesting that I could become aware of the multiverse? Yes. Riker blinked. What are we saying? Data could become some kind of cosmic being? The Watcher answered softly. Something greater. The Borg cube suddenly emitted a massive shockwave. The Enterprise rocked violently. Captain, Data announced. The assimilation wave is at 90% charge. Picard's voice cut through the chaos. All hands prepare for evasive maneuvers. But the Borg Data spoke again. He cannot escape. The Q's weapon began tearing open a massive vortex. Inside it, universes collapsed. Planets vanished. Stars went dark. The Borg Data continued. Once the wave activates, every version of your species will become one with the collective. Picard looked toward the Watcher. You knew this was coming. Yes. Then why haven't you stopped it? The Watcher's glowing eyes turned back to Data. Because we cannot. Data studied the cosmic being. You require my participation. Yes. Picard's voice hardened. What exactly are you asking him to do? The Watcher finally revealed the truth. We are asking Data to become something that has never existed before. The Borg Data spoke immediately. Dangerous. The Watcher ignored it. Data must evolve beyond his current form and merge with the quantum structure of the multiverse. Riker stared in disbelief. You're asking him to become what? A god? The Watcher's answer was quiet. No, a guardian. The Borg cube's weapon reached full charge. Assimilation wave ready, the Borg Data announced. Data looked at Picard. For the first time in his existence, his voice sounded uncertain. Captain, if I attempt what the Watcher proposes, there is a significant probability that my consciousness will cease to exist. Picard stepped closer. How significant? 93%. The bridge fell silent. Riker whispered, those are terrible odds. Data looked back at the approaching cube. If I do nothing, the probability of multiversal assimilation is 100%. Picard studied the android who had served beside him for years. He always wanted to be more human. Data. Yes, Captain. Picard's voice softened. Then you already know what a human would do. Data looked down for a moment, processing, calculating, but also feeling something new. The Borg Data spoke one last time. Your evolution will fail. Data looked directly at his future self. Perhaps. Then he turned toward the Watcher. I am ready. But as the Watcher began unlocking something ancient within Data's programming, a terrifying realization spread across the bridge. Because the Borg cube wasn't just waiting, it was adapting. And somewhere inside the collective, the Borg had already started preparing for Data's evolution. But what if the moment Data began to evolve, the Borg already knew how to stop him? The question echoed silently through the bridge as the impossible began. The Borg cube loomed like a dark god outside the view screen, its surface shifting endlessly as green energy pulsed across its vast mechanical landscape. Reality around it continued to twist and fracture, the entire streaks of light bending like fragile threads under unimaginable pressure. Inside the USS Enterprise, every system screamed with warnings. Captain, said Data, his voice steady but strained. The assimilation wave will deploy in 80 seconds. Jean-Luc Picard stood motionless in the center of the bridge. 80 seconds. 80 seconds until the Borg reshaped reality itself. The towering Watcher floated behind them, its ancient presence radiating energy that seemed older than the universe. Data, the Watcher said calmly. You must begin now. Riker turned sharply. Begin what, exactly? The Watcher answered quietly. The transformation. Data turned toward Picard. My neural network must be expanded beyond its current limitations. Picard frowned. How? The Watcher raised its glowing hand. By accessing knowledge that no mind has ever contained. Suddenly the bridge lights flickered. The air around Data shimmered. Tiny sparks of golden energy began appearing around his body, like fragments of distant stars. Riker stepped back. Okay, that's new. Data looked down at his hands. Streams of unfamiliar code raced through his consciousness, vast equations describing space-time, quantum pathways connecting entire universes, structures of existence no biological mind could ever comprehend. His voice lowered slightly. I am receiving information. Picard leaned forward. How much information? Data paused. Everything. The Watcher spoke again. This is the knowledge of our people. Riker blinked. You're giving him the knowledge of the Watchers? Yes. Picard's voice sharpened. Is that even possible? The Watcher's eyes dimmed slightly. It has never been attempted. Outside the ship, the Borg cube suddenly pulsed violently. The Borg data reappeared on the view screen. You're accelerating the anomaly. Picard stepped forward. You already know what he's becoming, don't you? The Borg data nodded. In several timelines this evolution occurred. Riker's eyes widened, and Borg data answered with chilling calm. We assimilated him. Cliff went quiet. Data's golden eyes flickered as massive amounts of information poured into his systems. But suddenly he stopped. His expression froze. Captain, Picard immediately noticed. What is it? Data turned slowly toward the view screen. I am detecting something within the Borg cube. The Borg data tilted its head. Recognition achieved. Riker frowned. What now? Data's voice dropped almost to a whisper. There are Watchers inside the collective. The Watcher hovering on the bridge stiffened. That is impossible. But Data shook his head. No? His eyes glowed faintly now, the first visible sign of his transformation. It already happened. The Borg data spoke calmly. In the timeline we originate from, the Borg assimilated several Watchers. The cosmic being on the Enterprise stared in stunned silence. That knowledge should be inaccessible. The Borg data's response was immediate. Nothing is inaccessible to the collective. Picard felt a chill crawl down his spine. If the Borg already understand the Watcher's power, the Borg data finished the thought. Then your attempt to create a multiversal guardian is already predicted. The cube began shifting again. Massive, mechanical towers extended from its surface, glowing with strange energy patterns. Data analyzed them instantly. They are constructing a countermeasure. Riker groaned. Of course they are. Picard turned sharply. How long until their weapon fires? Data looked back at his console. 40 seconds. The Watcher moved closer to Data. You must accelerate your evolution. Data nodded. My processing speed is increasing. Streams of golden light now flowed around him like a quiet storm. His voice began changing slightly deeper, layered with strange harmonic tones. I am beginning to perceive additional dimensions. Riker stared. Is he glowing? Picard ignored the comment. Data, what do you see? Data's eyes widened slightly. I see other images suddenly appeared across the view screen. Thousands of Enterprises. Thousands of Picards. Some victorious. Some destroyed. Some assimilated by the Borg. Riker whispered. That's every possible outcome. Data nodded slowly. Yes, the Watcher spoke again. You must find the path where the Borg lose. Data scanned the endless branching timelines. There are very few. Picard stepped closer. How few? Data paused. 3. Riker rubbed his forehead. 3 out of infinity. Data nodded. Yes. The Borg data spoke again. We are aware of those outcomes. The bridge fell silent. Picard's voice was cold. You're saying the Borg already accounted for the only timelines where they lose? The Borg cube's massive weapon suddenly roared to life. A swirling vortex of green and black energy began forming in front of it. Assimilation wave ready, the Borg data announced. Data looked back at the timelines, his glowing eyes scanning faster than any human mind could comprehend. But then something unexpected happened. He froze. Captain Picard stepped forward immediately. What is it? Data turned slowly toward the Watcher. There is another timeline. The Watcher's glowing eyes narrowed. That is impossible. But Data shook his head. It is hidden. Riker frowned. Hidden by what? Data answered quietly. By the Watchers. The cosmic being's voice became tense. That timeline was sealed. Picard looked back and forth between them. Why? The Watcher hesitated. Because in that timeline, something worse than the Borg emerges. The cube's weapons surged brighter. 30 seconds remaining. Data's eyes glowed brighter now. But that timeline also contains the only outcome where the Borg are permanently defeated. Riker blinked. Let me guess. There's a catch. Data nodded slowly. In that timeline, the Watchers do not exist anymore. The bridge went completely silent. Picard stared at the cosmic being. You erase the timeline where you die. The Watcher answered quietly. We sealed it to preserve the multiverse. Data looked back at the approaching wave of annihilation. There are now only 2 choices. Picard's voice hardened. Which are? Data answered. Allow the Borg to assimilate infinite universes. A pause, or open the forbidden timeline. The Watcher spoke immediately. That timeline cannot be allowed. Picard turned slowly. Why? The Watcher's voice carried something new. Fear, because whatever destroys the Watchers may destroy everything. Outside the Enterprise, the Borg weapon began its final countdown. 20 seconds. And suddenly Picard realized something terrifying. The future of every universe might depend on a timeline. Even the Watchers were afraid to see. But what if the only way to save the multiverse was to unleash a future so dangerous that even the Watchers feared it? The realization spread across the bridge like a silent shockwave. 20 seconds. That was all the time left before the Borg cube unleashed its multiversal assimilation wave. Outside the windows of the USS Enterprise, the vast mechanical monolith glowed with catastrophic energy, its weapon tearing open a vortex that twisted reality like paper in a storm. Inside the bridge, every alarm screamed, but no one moved, because the choice had suddenly become far worse than anyone imagined. Jean-Luc Picard slowly turned toward the towering Watcher floating behind them. "You sealed the timeline," Picard said carefully. "A timeline where the Borg lose, but the Watchers disappear." The Watcher's glowing eyes dimmed. "Yes." Picard stepped closer. "And now that timeline may be the only way to stop them." Yet Riker folded his arms, staring at the view screen where the Borg cube pulsed like a mechanical sun. "So why exactly are we hesitating?" The Watcher answered immediately. "Because that timeline contains something worse." Across the bridge, Data stood surrounded by faint golden light. The knowledge of countless universes still flowing into his expanding consciousness. "I've begun scanning the sealed timeline," Data said. The Watcher reacted sharply. "He cannot access it." Data looked up calmly. "I already have." Riker blinked. "You broke the cosmic lock." Yes, the Watcher's voice carried sudden tension. "That timeline was sealed for a reason." Picard turned toward Data. "What did you see?" Data paused. For the first time since his transformation began, he hesitated. "I'm uncertain how to describe it." The Borg cube's weapon surged brighter outside. 15 seconds. The Borg Data appeared again on the view screen, its expression cold and inevitable. "Your indecision is irrelevant." Picard ignored it. "Data, tell me." Data's glowing eyes flickered as he processed something enormous. In that timeline, the Borg still attempt to assimilate the multiverse. Riker groaned. "Of course they do. But they fail." Picard leaned forward. "What stops them?" Data slowly looked toward the Watcher. The bridge went quiet. Picard frowned. Data nodded. "In that timeline, Captain Picard becomes something unexpected." Riker raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I like the sound of that." The Borg Data interrupted. "You're analyzing irrelevant outcomes." Picard turned back to the screen. "You seemed very interested in stopping us from opening that timeline." The Borg Data did not deny it. "Yes." Picard's voice hardened. "Why?" The Borg Data's glowing eyes shifted slightly. "Because in that timeline, the collective encounters something it cannot assimilate." Riker leaned forward slowly. "And what exactly is that?" Data answered quietly. "A mind that understands the Borg." Picard's expression darkened. "You mean Locutus?" The name hung in the air like an old scar. Years ago, the Borg had taken Picard and turned him into Locutus, using his mind to coordinate the collective's invasion of the Federation. The memory still haunted him. Data nodded. "In the sealed timeline, that connection evolves." The Watcher stepped forward urgently. "You must not open it." Picard looked up at the cosmic being. "Why?" The Watcher's voice deepened. "Because that version of you does not simply defeat the Borg." Picard waited. "What does he do?" The Watcher hesitated. "He replaces them." The bridge exploded with stunned silence. Riker stared. "Hold on. Are we saying Picard becomes the Borg?" Data clarified. "Not exactly." The Borg cube outside began to pulse violently as its weapon approached activation. 10 seconds. Dato continued. "In that timeline, Captain Picard merges his consciousness with the collective." Picard's eyes narrowed. "To control them?" "Yes." Riker exhaled slowly. "Well, that's one way to win." But the Watcher shook its head. "You do not control them." Picard felt a cold realization forming. "What happens instead?" Beta answered. "The Borg evolve." Picard's voice lowered. "Into what?" Data's glowing eyes flickered with unfamiliar emotion. "Something that transcends biological and synthetic life." But the Borg Data spoke again. "A dangerous mutation." Picard folded his arms. "You're afraid of it?" "Yes." The Borg Data's tone remained perfectly calm. "In that timeline, the collective ceases to be Borg." Riker blinked. Wait, if they're not Borg anymore? Data finished the thought. They become something new. The Watcher's voice turned grave. A species capable of rewriting reality itself. Outside, the vortex of the assimilation weapon roared louder. 5 seconds, Picard looked from the Watcher to Data, to the Borg cube that threatened every universe. So our choices are simple, Picard said quietly. Let the Borg assimilate infinite realities. He turned toward Data. Or open the timeline where it becomes something powerful enough to replace them. The Watcher's voice carried desperation now. That path could destroy the multiverse. Picard gave a faint smile. So could doing nothing. 3 seconds. The Borg Data spoke one last time. Your resistance is meaningless. 2 seconds. Picard looked directly at Data. Can you open the sealed timeline? Data nodded. Yes, Captain. Picard took a breath and made the decision that would change the fate of every universe. Do it! Outside the Enterprise, reality shattered. But the moment the forbidden timeline opened, something unexpected happened. The Borg cube suddenly stopped its attack. Completely. The Borg Data looked directly at Picard, and for the first time since this battle began, the Borg sounded afraid. Contact detected. Picard frowned. Contact with what? The Borg Data answered quietly. With you. But what if the moment the forbidden timeline opened, something on the other side was already waiting for them? The bridge of the USS Enterprise went completely silent. Outside the ship, the massive Borg cube had frozen in space. The swirling weapon that had been seconds away from tearing through infinite universes now hovered motionless, its vortex collapsing into unstable fragments of green light. For the first time since the encounter began, the Borg had stopped. Every officer on the bridge stared at the viewscreen. Jean-Luc Picard slowly stepped forward. Report. Data was glowing more intensely now, faint streams of golden energy moving across his synthetic skin like flowing code. The sealed timeline has been opened. Picard kept his voice steady. And the Borg? Data tilted his head slightly. They are listening. That word alone sent a ripple of confusion through the bridge. Riker leaned closer to his console. Listening to what? Data's eyes flickered. To a signal originating from the newly opened timeline. Behind them, the towering Watcher suddenly moved forward. Its ancient voice carried a weight that none of them had heard before. That signal should not exist. Picard turned. You sealed the timeline, but you didn't erase it. The Watcher said nothing. On the viewscreen, the Borg Data appeared once more. But something had changed. The drone's cold expression now carried a hint of uncertainty. We have detected a consciousness. Picard folded his arms. You mean the version of me from that timeline? Yes, Riker whispered. That's unsettling. The Borg Data continued. The entity has made contact with the collective. Picard's eyes narrowed. Already. Data nodded slowly. The connection is instantaneous across timelines. The bridge lights flickered again. Outside, the Borg cube began emitting strange pulses of energy that rippled across space like waves through water. What are they doing? Riker asked. Data scanned the readings. They're attempting to establish a neural link. With who? Picard asked. Data answered quietly. With the Alterno Captain Picard. The Watcher's voice suddenly became tense. That connection must not stabilize. Picard looked sharply at the cosmic being. You were afraid of this timeline for a reason. Yes, and now we're about to find out why. Across the viewscreen, the Borg cube suddenly shifted. Thousands of green lights across its surface flickered in chaotic patterns. The Borg Data spoke again. Unexpected resistance. Picard frowned. Resistance from who? A pause. Then the Borg Data answered. From the collective itself. Riker blinked. Wait, the Borg are resisting their own connection. Data's glowing eyes widened slightly. Captain, I am detecting something extraordinary. Picard stepped closer. What is it? Data's voice lowered. The alternate Picard is not simply communicating with the Borg. The viewscreen suddenly exploded with images. Entire star systems, civilizations, galaxies. But every image carried the same pattern: Borg technology transforming. Ships once shaped like cubes were changing, curving, evolving. The mechanical structures were becoming something else. Captain, Data whispered. He is rewriting the Borg. Picard stared at the images. How? Data processed rapidly. He is using the same neural link that once created Picard felt a cold chill move through him. When the Borg turned me into locutus, they connected my mind to the entire collective. Data nodded. Yes. Riker's eyes widened. Oh, this other version of Picard is doing the same thing. Data looked up slowly. But instead of being controlled by the Borg, Picard finished the thought. He's controlling them. The Watcher spoke sharply. It is worse than that. Outside the Enterprise, the Borg cube suddenly split open. Massive panels unfolded, revealing vast internal structures glowing with unfamiliar energy. The cube was changing. Rapidly. What's happening to it? Riker asked. Data's voice carried astonishment. The collective is restructuring its entire network architecture. Picard's voice dropped. Into what? Data answered. A singular consciousness. The Borg Data suddenly reappeared, but its voice was distorted, now like thousands of voices merging into one. Identity. Destrativizing. The drone twitched. We are. Then the screen flickered, and a new voice replaced it. Calm, measured, and unmistakably familiar. Good evening. Every person on the bridge froze, because the face that appeared on the screen was Picard, but not the Picard standing on the Enterprise. This version looked older, more tired, and his eyes carried a strange glow, part Borg green, part human warmth. Riker whispered, "That's you." The alternate Jean-Luc Picard studied them calmly. "I suppose you could say that." The Picard on the Enterprise stepped forward. "What have you done to the Borg?" The alternate Picard gave a faint smile. "I liberated them." The Watcher reacted immediately. "You have transformed the collective." "Yes." The alternate Picard leaned slightly closer to the screen. "After all, if the Borg's strength comes from unity," his glowing eyes shifted, "why not give that unity a purpose?" Data analyzed the signal in amazement. "Captain, the Borg no longer show signs of hostile assimilation protocols." Riker blinked. "You saying the Borg stopped being villains?" The alternate Picard answered calmly. "They have become explorers." The entire bridge fell silent. Picard stared at his alternate self. "You turned the Borg into a peaceful civilization." "Not peaceful," the alternate Picard corrected. "Curious." The Watcher's voice grew darker. "You have created something unpredictable." The alternate Picard nodded. "That is the point." Outside the Enterprise, the transformed Borg cube slowly rotated in space. But it no longer looked like a weapon. It looked like a ship searching the stars. The alternate Picard spoke again. "The multiverse is far larger than even the Watchers realized." Picard crossed his arms. "And your solution was to rewrite one of its most dangerous species." "Yes." The Watcher's glowing eyes dimmed. "You have altered the balance of existence." The alternate Picard leaned back slightly. "Good." Then he said something that sent a ripple of unease through everyone on the bridge. "Because something else is coming." Riker frowned. "Something worse than the Borg." The alternate Picard's glowing eyes met Data's. "Yes." Data's voice lowered. "I believe I am detecting the same presence." Picard turned quickly. "What presence?" Data looked toward the distant stars. His voice carried a tone no one had ever heard from him before. Something that even the Watchers cannot observe. The Watcher froze. "Cliffs, that is impossible." Data shook his head slowly. "No." Then the sensors screamed. Because something enormous had just appeared at the edge of the galaxy. And for the first time since the Watchers began observing the universe, they could not see what it was. But what if the thing approaching the galaxy was something even the Watchers had never seen before? Something that existed beyond observation itself? For billions of years, the Watchers had believed one thing with absolute certainty. Nothing escaped their sight. Every star that ignited, every civilization that rose and fell, every war, every discovery, every fragile moment of hope in the vast ocean of existence. They had seen it all, or so they thought. But now, for the first time in their ancient existence, something had appeared in the universe that they could not observe, and that terrified them. On the bridge of the USS Enterprise, the tension was so thick it felt like gravity itself had grown heavier. The viewscreen flickered with chaotic sensor data. Entire constellations were vanishing from the scans, not destroyed, not moved, simply disappearing from observation. Jean-Luc Picard stood frozen, staring at the readings. Report beside him, Data was glowing brighter than ever, streams of golden light still flowing across his evolving form. But even he sounded unsettled. "I am unable to determine the object's physical structure." Riker frowned. "Meaning what?" Data hesitated. "It does not appear to exist in a form that our sensors can detect." Behind them, the towering Watcher spoke quietly. "Because it is not part of this universe." Every head on the bridge turned. Picard's voice sharpened. "You mean it's extra-dimensional?" The Watcher shook its head slowly. No. A pause. It is extra observational. Riker blinked. I'm going to need that translated into English. The Watcher's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. My people exist beyond normal time. We observe reality from a higher dimensional framework. Picard nodded. Yes, you've made that clear, the Watcher continued. But whatever is approaching exists beyond even that. The bridge went silent. Data processed the statement rapidly. You are suggesting this entity exists outside the multiverse itself? Yes, Riker rubbed his forehead. So, let me get this straight. He pointed toward the view screen. The Borg were about to conquer every universe. He gestured toward the alternate Picard still visible on the screen. Then another version of the captain shows up and rewrites the Borg into explorers. He turned toward the Watcher. And now, something bigger than the multiverse is showing up. The Watcher answered simply. Yes. Outside the ship, the newly transformed Borg vessel hovered calmly. Gone was the aggressive mechanical tension that had once defined the collective. Now the structure pulsed with a strange harmony, a network of minds working together, but no longer seeking conquest. The alternate Jean-Luc Picard appeared again on the view screen. I suspected this might happen. The Picard on the Enterprise turned toward him. He knew something was coming. Yaz Riker crossed his arms. And you didn't think that was important to mention earlier? Alternate Picard gave a faint smile. I had to make sure the Borg were ready. The Watcher's voice grew tense. Ready for what? The alternate Picard looked toward the distant stars. For the first species that does not want to be observed. Data's glowing eyes widened slightly. That would explain the sensor void. Picard leaned forward. You're saying this entity actively avoids observation? Yes. The alternate Picard nodded. And it has been moving toward this galaxy for a very long time. Riker frowned. How long? The answer chilled the entire bridge. Since before the Federation existed, Data processed the timeline rapidly. That would mean it began moving long before the Borg evolved. The alternate Picard nodded again. Yes. The Watcher's voice darkened. My people should have seen it. You couldn't, the alternate Picard replied calmly. Because it evolved to exist outside the awareness of observers. The Watcher seemed almost shaken. That would require knowledge of our existence. Picard's eyes narrowed. You're saying this thing knows about the Watcher's Jens. The alternate Picard leaned closer to the screen. And it doesn't like being watched. Suddenly the Enterprise trembled violently. Alarms exploded across every console. Captain, Data announced. The object has accelerated. Picard turned sharply. How fast? Data's voice carried genuine astonishment. It just crossed half the galaxy in 3 seconds. Riker stared. That's impossible, the Watcher answered quietly. It is no longer traveling through space. Picard's voice dropped. And how is it moving? The Watcher looked toward the stars. It is moving through observation itself. The lights on the bridge dimmed. Across the galaxy, stars began vanishing from the sensors again. But this time, they returned seconds later. Something was passing over them, like a shadow moving across reality. The alternate Picard spoke softly. It has arrived. The view screen flickered violently. Then suddenly, space itself tore open. Not a warp rift, not a Borg vortex. Something older, darker. From the opening emerged a shape so massive it dwarfed entire star systems. But its form refused to stay stable. Every time the sensors tried to define it, the shape changed. Like reality itself couldn't agree on what it was seeing. Data whispered something no one expected from him. I cannot comprehend it. The Watcher stared in stunned silence. My people cannot observe it. Riker leaned forward slowly. Then how do we stop it? The alternate Picard answered quietly. We don't. The Borg vessel beside them suddenly began moving toward the entity. Thousands of voices echoed through subspace, the liberated collective speaking as one. Picard frowned. What are they doing? The alternate Picard's glowing eyes soft. They are doing what the Borg were always meant to do, which is, he answered with calm certainty, to adapt. The colossal entity shifted again, its impossible form stretching across entire solar systems, and then it did something that made even the Watcher step back. It looked directly at the Enterprise, not with eyes, but with awareness. For the first time in history, something had noticed the observers, and the voice that followed was older than stars. Who watches? The Watchers. The Watchers. But what if the being that had finally noticed the Watchers was not an enemy at all, but the universe's way of correcting a mistake that had existed since the beginning of time? The question echoed silently across the bridge of the USS Enterprise as the impossible presence filled the stars. The massive entity hovering beyond the galaxy could not truly be seen. Every attempt by sensors, scanners, or even advanced Borg systems to define it collapsed into contradictory readings. One moment it appeared like a vast storm stretching across star systems. The next moment, it seemed like a single point of impossible density. It was as though reality itself could not decide how to describe it. But one thing was undeniable. It was aware. The ancient voice that had spoken moments earlier still echoed faintly through subspace. Who watches? The Watchers. Jean-Luc Picard slowly stepped forward. For years he had faced gods, machines, and civilizations older than humanity. But this moment felt different, because whatever this entity was, it had just exposed a truth no one had ever questioned. The Watchers had always been the observers, but now someone was observing them. Behind Picard, the towering Watcher stood unnaturally still. For the first time since its arrival, the cosmic being looked uncertain. We did not know such a species existed. Beside the captain, Data continued to glow with the evolving knowledge of countless timelines. His voice carried quiet amazement. I believe it is not a species. Picard turned slightly. Then what is it? Data paused, as his expanded consciousness reached further into the structure of reality. A function. Riker blinked. A function of what? Data looked toward the stars. Of the multiverse itself. The Watcher reacted immediately. That is impossible. But the voice of the colossal entity returned, vibrating across space like distant thunder. Observation creates imbalance. Every screen on the Enterprise flickered as the entity's presence rippled through physics itself. 4 eons. You have watched? The Watcher stepped forward. We have never interfered. The entity answered calmly. Until now. The words struck the bridge like a shockwave. The Watcher hesitated. Picard looked toward the cosmic observer. You broke your own rule. And that changed something fundamental. The massive entity shifted again, its impossible shape folding across dimensions. Observation without consequence was the balance. The voice deepened, but interference creates correction. Data processed the statement rapidly. You are the correction. Yes. Riker leaned against the console. So you show up whenever cosmic referees start breaking their own rules. The entity did not react to the sarcasm. Instead, it turned its attention toward the Borg vessel drifting near the Enterprise. The liberated collective pulsed quietly with its new purpose. The alternate Jean-Luc Picard appeared again on the view screen. You see now why I changed them. The Picard aboard the Enterprise nodded slowly. You needed something that could adapt to the unknown. Yes. The entity's awareness shifted toward the Borg. They have changed. The alternate Picard spoke calmly. They were once driven by perfection through assimilation. He paused. Now they seek perfection through understanding. The entity remained silent for a long moment. Then something extraordinary happened. The colossal presence began shrinking. Not physically, conceptually. It was compressing its existence into a form the universe could better understand. Slowly, a shape appeared on the Enterprise view screen. Humanoid. Tall. Its body formed from shifting starlight. A figure that looked almost human, but infinitely older. The Watcher stared in astonishment. You are becoming observable. The being answered. I am becoming understandable. Picard studied it carefully. Why? The being's glowing eyes turned toward him. Because your species has done something unexpected. Riker crossed his arms. Oh, this should be good. The entity gestured toward Data. Toward the Borg. Toward both versions of Picard. You adapted. Data spoke quietly. Adaptation is the fundamental principle of survival. The entity nodded. But you adapted morally. Not just biologically. It looked toward the Watcher. Your people observed existence for billions of years. The Watcher said nothing. But these beings changed it in minutes. Picard stepped forward. We made a choice. Yes, the entity's voice softened slightly. A choice to evolve rather than dominate. The liberated Borg vessels now spread across nearby space, their networks exploring rather than conquering. The alternate Picard watched quietly from the other timeline. The entity continued. This universe does not require correction. The Watcher looked stunned. You will not intervene.
No.
Picard felt a wave of relief pass through the bridge, but the being was not finished. However, the era of silent observation is over. The Watcher's glowing eyes dimmed. You are removing our purpose, the entity answered gently. It is changing. Across the stars, something remarkable happened. The presence of the Watcher began to fade, not violently, not as punishment, but as transformation. Data observed the phenomenon with fascination. The Watcher is becoming integrated into the universe. The cosmic observer looked down at its fading form. We are becoming part of the stories we once watched, Picard spoke softly. Perhaps that's what you were always meant to be. The entity of Starlight nodded. The multiverse does not need silent witnesses. It looked toward humanity. It needs participants. The Watcher's form dissolved into countless sparks of light that scattered across space like newborn stars. And just like that, the era of the Watchers ended. Silence filled the bridge. Riker finally exhaled. Well, that was a day. The alternate Picard smiled faintly from the screen. The universe is far stranger than we imagined. Picard nodded, and far more hopeful. Data's glowing aura slowly faded as his evolution had stabilized. His voice returned to its calm, familiar tone. Captain, the Borg have begun transmitting exploration signals across the galaxy. Riker chuckled. From conquerors to explorers. Picard looked out at the endless stars. Perhaps that was always their destiny. The being of Starlight began to dissolve as well, its task complete. Before disappearing, it left them with one final message. The universe does not belong to those who watch it. A pause. It belongs to those brave enough to change it. The stars outside the USS Enterprise stretched endlessly once more. But the universe was no longer the same. The Borg were no longer conquerors. The Watchers were no longer observers. And somewhere across infinite time, humanity had proven something extraordinary. Even in a multiverse filled with gods, machines, and cosmic forces beyond comprehension, the most powerful force of all was still choice.